about the good parts, how they're contributing to the parent company's growth, the innovation. And that is true, that is very true. But we also want to look at what are some of those risks that come into the play as we are seeing India increasingly becoming the GCC hub, and a lot of innovation being driven from here. And we are looking at different aspects of risk here. So one is that, of course, the concentration in a few cities, uh, some of the locations in India means that there is greater efficiency. For the parent company, it means there's greater efficiency, but that also creates a single point of risk. And so one question we will navigate is that how is it a hype, or these risks are actually as real and as important as we think they are. And also we are looking at navigating the geopolitical scenario, the economic uncertainties, and I think the last 1 month has been full of uncertainties and geopolitical tensions, the tariffs, the wars, etc. So, and this has an impact on the overall GCC landscape globally, and of course in India as well. So, Chakra, let me start with you. Like I said, centralized operations drive efficiency, but they're also the single point of risk. So one is that how much of a risk do you see that to be, if it can be quantified, qualified? And also, how do the GCC strike the right balance between, unlocking the opportunities as well as mitigating the risks?
Thank you, Shipra.
I think it should be. Yeah.
I'm audible? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. First and foremost, I just want to introduce, myself. I represent Reckitt Global Hub here, and I'm not sure how many of you know Reckitt. Yeah, few, I think, those who have been associated with us, okay. But if no, very limited hands, but we are the makers of Lysol, Dettol, Harpic, and all, so every household would have touched this. But just to bring it back to the conversation here, our primary objective should be about risk management in business. And that goes to even the location strategy that we want to put in, right? As rightly said, concentration of talent at a single place or concentration of capabilities at a given place, a location, definitely drives efficiency, but it is definitely a single point of failure. And hence, the multi-location strategy or the hub and spoke model that we need to look at. What we need to really look at is what are those capabilities that can be centralized? The common ones, HR, IT, finance, very easy. But there are capabilities that are definitely required based on the market needs, the consumer sentiment, the business operations that we run in variety of places. And hence those capabilities that are required to address those has to be closer to those regions and markets. So I strongly say in terms of managing the business continuity, this is the right way to move forward in terms of putting the talent at the right place, in terms of identifying the business need. It's not just for sake of centralizing. Yes, we do get some efficiency out of it, but not everything is about centralization. So that's how I say.
So if I were to ask you a one-word answer for concentration versus diversification for risk mitigation,
the answer is simple: diversification for risk mitigation. But again, it is all about this. Efficiencies is important, but it is all about business continuity. Once you have the business continuity in place and you have the right risk mitigation in terms of your supply chain changes, your geopolitical situation, and if you're really able to unlock value by being closer to those places, I think efficiency is not always the number one priority.
Right. Tanay.
If I may just add to that.
Yeah, please.
What Chakra said, right? I think the GCCs are also thinking about the enterprise as a whole, as a global level, right? The risk and the concentration is not only about concentrating those specific skill sets in a specific center within India, but if you really think about it, There are center of excellences, there are teams which are supposed to do a very, very specific function at a global level. So having that team sitting in GCC actually doesn't create an additional risk. It's just an additional factor that needs to be taken care of. So whatever the organizational policies and strategies that are brought in, especially for the risk management at that level, the same thing applies at the local level in GCCs as well. Right?
Yeah, totally with you. And that goes with what you said, like say, just because we have a capability team that is sitting elsewhere outside the GCC, it doesn't need to be serving only for that market. It might be the right place to put the capability at that location because of the availability of talent for that skill set. So it is all about, like, say, how do these two teams connect and also coexist and contribute together. That's all.
And also, I think knowledge transfer, the right knowledge transfer, so that that becomes a big risk mitigation checklist if there is good knowledge transfer.
Collaboration is key, and it goes without saying. But we need to have some processes in place, right? Like say, we cannot drive knowledge transfer across locations, across teams without having a foundational structure and process to it. And hence, like say, it is also important for organizations to think, to be very open for moving talent across, so that it's not just about sharing knowledge, but also going and experiencing it. So giving opportunities for teams to travel and co-locate and work for some time and come back would actually help mitigate some of those risk concerns.
Yeah. So Tanay, I want to get your opinion on, first of all, concentration versus diversification for risk mitigation, and also your view on how do you see the concentration in specific locations becoming the chances of them becoming a single point of failure, and if you would like to add about how within your organization you are looking at that risk mitigation and balancing the fine line between diversification and concentration.
Thank you. But even before this question, as we were coming on stage, I was worried, and the risk going on in my mind was we are right next to the lunch hour. So the risk was whether you'll stay put here and brave it through. And then the other was that, AI is a much more sexier topic to listen to. Risk at times doesn't get the attention away from your phone.
We'll be discussing the risk.
Yeah, so we are talking risk. I come from banking, financial services, and risk is a very sexy word there. We are all about risk and return as far as things are concerned. I always get rapped on my knuckle from my 21-year-old son when I say pandemic was good. We lost. The country, the world itself went through a lot of things, and risk became a very strong word at that point in time. But if I speak from a risk perspective, and coming to your question, Shipra, is that question about should we all do it in one location, can we do it across the globe, that became a non-issue. Suddenly across the world, you didn't end up only in, so if I'm talking about ourselves, I'm part of Allstate, we are insurance in the country for 10, 12 years. We have two large centers in Pune and Bangalore. But suddenly, the diversification question became very real, where we were almost across 340 different cities, towns and villages in the country. And we were able to operate without really impacting the outcome, whether to our customers or impacting from a productivity perspective. And that really was opened up in the minds of the business leaders across the world, that we can operate in a fashion which is a lot more diversified, or in terms of location, we are able to look at processes. No wonder that the GCCs are growing the way they are growing. Because during this period, a lot of them really did a lot of test and learns to be able to do it. So if you're asking me, I think for certain functions, still a centralized function would make sense. And then I'll pick on that, even if I'm talking here within the country. If you look towards functions like finance, or if you look towards functions like HR, for the country, you could still run it out of one location. But if I'm talking about technology teams, or if I'm talking about delivering insurance operations or doing work, the more you can spread yourselves, whether it is around attracting talent, the more you can spread yourselves in terms of looking at diversity of thought and inputs and opportunities coming in, the better it is for your business. So absolutely. I will also touch on, Shishir, what you mentioned in there. When we speak about concentrated, most of the time we end up speaking only with the Indian mind, like
Yeah,
in India. But in the global context, where do we fit in and what level of concentration are we bringing in to that operation? That should really be driving our decision with respect to what you're saying.
So one, I can see that both of you are trying to like really walk a tight balance between diversification and concentration. Charlene, I would like to get your view on this. And one is, of course, what is, because you would have customers who usually would be grappling with these kind of questions in their mind. So what is your take on this point?
I think I completely second what Tanay just said, right? So I think technology has become this great equalizer, right? Where I understand you might own some real estate and a building in one location, but your talent is not really tied to that location anymore, right? And there are multiple technologies today that exist that make this exact thing a reality, right? And also technology itself has now become global. No particular software or piece of capability is tied to any particular region, right? It's all about how many places can you deploy what you say you have. And I think that itself kind of takes care of any sort of concentration risk, at least in terms of geography. And again, to Tanay's point, I think it's a myopic view to take that we are concentrated in India. Any MNC moving to India itself is a diversification, right? When they're opening up in India, it's a diversification for them. If you're thinking from a GCC leader in India's perspective, yes, maybe moving into tier 2, tier 3 cities to kind of spread that out would be a good thing to do. Looking at technologies that are interoperable, right, that are not tied to any particular platform or location is something that I think is already happening. But yeah, I think to kind of summarize, balance is the word I would use. As a single, it needs to be both. It needs to be centralized as well as diversified in the right location, aspects of a company's operations.
Yeah. So Shishir, in your earlier comment, you mentioned about the looking from a global perspective, of course. So, however, when those global headquarters, they see India as let's say a critical hub for GCCs. For them, it is. So and cost arbitrage being one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons. So how can organizations really evaluate their reliance on the Indian ecosystem? That it is a strategic strength for them, or as a potential vulnerability? How do we really assess, between the two where they stand, and also what indicators should they monitor to ensure a balanced approach? We have been talking about balance, but how do they really evaluate and create that balance?
Sure. I think I'll probably just first introduce myself very, very quickly. Shishir Chaudhary from Yash Technologies. I'm the business head for the GCC business at Yash, and we are a mid-level system integration company, have been serving GCC for a long time. It's not new to us. I think coming back to question, Shipra, I think, if we really look last 30 years of trajectory of the Indian IT industry overall, right? I think we have done a lot of good work, but at the same time, I think we have been focused on what typically we have been calling the consumed IT or the IT services, right? I think that's what we have done, and a lot of our competitors, I would say, the system integration companies, have been doing that last 30 years, right? Now, what is also changing is the delivered IT that is more on the product development, product engineering. That was not really concentrated in India, but that is also coming to India now. So as companies...
Does that increase the risk? Does that increase the risk? Because now we are seeing more value added and high...
Let's park that. I think I'll continue on this first, and then come back to the risk aspect of that, right? The reason I was kind of bringing both the consumed IT, which we have been doing for a long time, and the delivered IT, which is also a little bit new, but I think we are getting expert in that also. And so in both of these areas, as companies start to shift their workload, okay, I think there are 3 or 4 different things that every organization will look at, right? Cost is definitely one of the large ones, So one of my friend who is also happens to be a center head for one of the large companies, one of the large GCCs, He says that every time he goes back for budget, the CFO compares his cost with the system integration company which was doing exactly the same job before him. So the cost factor will always be there. The second thing what I typically call, with my customers is what I call an innovation index. That how much of an innovation you are able to bring as a GCC, as a GCC team to the table. And I'm talking, when I say table, it is the global table here. And I'm not only concentrating on what is given to GCC, right? Third most important factor is the modernization index, what I call. Again, it is very different from the innovation index because modernization is all about the applications that are under your realm, how much you are able to upgrade them, how much you are able to keep it not getting obsolete, right? And the fourth and the most important thing is how much business value you are able to bring to the table. I think nothing else, whatever the three things of what I said before, nothing beats this last one. Because if you are not bringing something to the table as a business value, what are you doing then, right? I think so. These are the four factors. So as we go further, and to your question, right, I think the organizations, as they start looking at GCCs and whether I want to keep investing in it, they will keep looking at these four factors. I'll come back to risk a little bit later, but
Yeah,
I'll park
sure.
here.
Yeah, great. So before I come to Chakri and Tanay, Shalin, very quickly, how would you suggest evaluating, India? It is now, let's say, a critical hub for GCC. So evaluating the Indian ecosystem in terms of whether the reliance on the ecosystem is a strategic strength or a risk. So how do you? Is there a checklist of 2-3 things that they need to be evaluated?
Yeah, I think we need to first look at what's going well for India and why it's become a critical GCC hub for companies worldwide. And that is a very, very deep talent pool across multiple kinds of technologies, right? Whether it's AI, ML, cybersecurity, cloud, and deep engineering research and development kind of work as well, right? Not just software, BFSI. A lot of really deep ER&D kind of companies also exist in India as GCCs. So I think that's a very important number one factor. The second is, I feel we have to look at the innovation. India does not just have a great GCC ecosystem, which is obviously very mature, but it also has the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. So there is a lot of cross-pollination and collaboration that can be done between these two ecosystems, which is happening today, right? And do you as a GCC or an MNC feel that we've reached the top of that? Or do you feel that there is still more collaboration that can happen? And the third, which kind of ties all of this together, is a regulatory framework. I think our central government and a lot of state governments within the country are doing some phenomenal work in trying to boost this sector of the economy. So if someone is evaluating whether we've reached peak GCC in India, I think these are the things you need to look at. And if you feel that, you're getting there, then maybe. But my personal reading of this is I don't think we are anywhere close to that in any of these three factors. So I don't think so. I don't think we've reached a point where we can say we are saturated. Yeah.
Right. Yes, Tanay.
And I'm responding to your question from a risk perspective in there of what should I be really thinking through as I set up more within my existing organization, or if I'm coming in new to set up something in here. Cost keeps coming up. And so there is also that constant question to say, and especially for the ones who are coming in new, there is always that part to say, oh, but in India, costs are growing at 10%. And so at some point, the cost arbitrage will disappear. And I've been in the industry for the last 20, 25 years. 17 years back, NASSCOM published saying we had 17 years before this would really go away. Even today, I'm sure if you project, it will show 17 years from now. But cost is definitely a play. But talent and the ability to get the right talent, which is not just doing the lower part rule-based work, but a lot more complex work, that is something to really think through whether that pipeline is in there. A part of that infrastructure, whether it is technology infrastructure, whether it is with respect, and today, cloud and a lot of that is making it easier to create an ecosystem which is global and nothing to do with India, and ensuring that we are able to be more resilient. Things that I would say within the Indian ecosystem that we'll have to figure out, like the cyber threats that are coming in within our own context in India. after the Ukraine-Russia war is gone, what will really happen? We'll have to work that through. But also new regulation like DPDP that's coming in. What does that mean? Even from a risk of setting things up, permanent establishment and our response to permanent establishment, how does that impact of what we are trying to set up here as a GCC? Those would be other regulatory things that I would add to the list to think through to make this ecosystem more robust.
Right. So, Chakri, coming to you, we are in the midst of, like I said, a lot of disruptions, geopolitical, economic uncertainties, and on top of that, you have the third-party vendors, the supply chain, including the software supply chain, which are bringing in different potential vulnerabilities into the system. So, how do you suggest, the GCCs, mitigate these risks? Are there any frameworks and tools that you would put in place?
Yeah. So I would say this, the risk mitigation is all towards, as I said in my initial statement, is all towards business continuity, right? Can we develop capabilities, solutions, technologies that can really cater to business continuity no matter what, whether it's a cyber risk, whether it is a geopolitical risk. And the location strategy is also going to be a key part of it. Yes, we could do centrally certain things to mitigate those things with the capabilities that are required, maybe a cyber capability, but can we having a cyber capability centrally can manage everything across the organization is very subjective. But at the same time, if you want to put a pharmacovigilance, is it a capability that you want to put centrally, or you want to put it out closer to your R&D or your place where you're actually doing the core manufacturing execution or whatever? So I think what I can tell is the frameworks and tools are definitely there, but it is more about trying to identify that what exactly is the business continuity that you want to support, and then adopting things around that would be the key.
And Tanay, what would be your advice in terms of tools and frameworks to ensure that business continuity and resilience in the face of all these disruptions, whether they are cyber threats, technology-led, or they are geopolitical and economic disruptions? So what kind of framework would you have in mind for that?
Business continuity till 2020 used to be a very desktop-led exercise. And then came 2020 with the pandemic in there. Suddenly, a lot of those risks that we had never imagined became a reality. Yeah. Most of our continuity plans would have lines which said, if something happens here, we will send the work back to the original location and they will do it. Now, that never existed during pandemic. And so the BCP, and especially doing that scenario analysis, I'll give an example. For the BCP of the past, today, earlier in the morning, we had somebody from Warner Brothers and Netflix and Prime. All of them are now talking about creating content, which is a two-screen content. Like the topic today, this panel has that same challenge, that there's something going on Netflix, but you're busy browsing the other screen also. So how do you make that other thing on the screen equally interesting enough that you're able to do it two-screen? I think the BCP plan needs to move away from that two-screen content to only one-screen content. And what I mean by that is really investing in doing that scenario analysis of what's critical, how much of that work, rather than saying we are only 20% of the larger workforce. In that specific work, what is the level of criticality and the investment that we have done in this geography? And then actually putting out, whether it is cyber, whether it is talent related, whether it is some danga happening in the city, or whether it is with respect to a cyber attack, what would we really be able to do if that scenario was happening, and not do it as a desktop thing. When we actually talk about that, and most of the times the businesses shy away from testing it out, but when we do that testing, how do we actually test it out in a real life scenario, or as close to a real life scenario? I think to me, the more robust we make that, the better is any meaning in that BCP planning. Otherwise, it's just a sham.
So, Shishir, yes, of course.
Yeah, I would like to add. I mean, this is excellent point, Chakra and Tanay, right? I think so. The name BCP itself says is a business continued planning, right? So, I mean, to your point, it's not about the only desktop support or something like that. It's the business process that is getting affected. Now, what is that business process itself, and where exactly it is getting run, and kind of looking at it from the holistic angle and trying to manage that rather than only managing a portion of it that has been given to a specific team. That's extremely important. So that was just an additional comment to your thing. From the risk management point of view, especially from the skill sets, and ensuring that they are sort of captive to the company, right? In a way, in my opinion, I don't think whether it was brought up in any other discussions also, but the tier 2 and tier 3 cities are coming up as one of the very, very strong alternative. The attrition risk goes down. The overall talent pool that you create becomes a little bit of a captive talent pool rather than only focusing on a very, very generic technology. If you combine the business process with the technology and create a talent pool which is more focused on your own specific business processes, that becomes very, very important. And that kind of, is one of the ways of risk management that I am seeing with some of my customers.
Right. So very quickly, since we are running out of time, I would like to, Shishir and Shalin, from both of you, from a technology perspective. AI, we all know, is becoming a critical part of the technology stack, and so do the risks that are associated with it. Now, as the technology stack is growing, the complexities are getting added, not just AI, but other aspects of the stack, including security. So complexity is increasing, the vulnerabilities to the tech stack are increasing. So what kind of risk mitigation, organizations can work on, whether it's relating to cyber threats, vendor lock-in, scalability of the tech stack? So I would like to get your perspective on from both of you. So Shalin.
Sure. So I think from an evaluation perspective, it's pretty simple, right? I think if you look at your tech stack from top to bottom, you have to understand the balance between proprietary and interoperable technologies that you are deploying, right? If when you go through your tech stack, you realize you're over-indexed on one or two larger vendors, there is that single point of failure. And we have seen this, during the various geopolitical upheavals that we've had over the last year, where entire countries have suddenly lost access to their money because one vendor decided, or two vendors decided, they no longer want to operate in that country. So you want to make sure that you don't have vendor lock-in. You are in your tech stack, you have a multiplicity of vendors, right? And there is, for certain very important factors, redundancies built in, right? Whether that is through an active-active setup that is globally deployed in geo-redundant zones of the world, so that any even natural occurrence in any part of the world does not affect your business continuity, right? But I think in today's technological landscape, making sure that you're taking advantage of all the new technologies that are available, whether they are adaptable technologies like containerization and microservices, or you're using open APIs and open standards or open source technologies, you need to make sure you're leveraging that rather than locking yourself into one or two large vendors, and then you're sometimes maybe at their mercy. This would be good BCP just strategy, right, overall.
I want to specifically emphasize on the software supply chain risks and the CrowdStrike event.
Exactly.
And the SolarWinds, of course. The other CrowdStrike is, of course, the latest, biggest example in how it brought everything down on its knees. So software supply chain is again one aspect. Also, Shishir, how do you see the organizations? How should they look at future-proofing their investment, as well as mitigating all these risks, technology-related risks that we talked about?
Right. And I think I'll probably answer this not from the technology angle, but maybe from the process angle a little bit, right? So if you really look at the decision making that happens for even a selection of a technology, and again I'm talking at a enterprise level, right? A business need drives the technology decision. In many of the cases, what really are the very, very strong business initiatives that determines the technology, and now in that determination, the GCC plays a very, very influential role, right? Because at the end of the day, a lot of the implementation of that technology is going to happen in the GCCs. So from that perspective, I think, as the investments are made in those technologies, it is extremely important to identify that, number one, that at what stage your own technology landscape is today, whether it is adaptable to the new technology you are bringing in or not. That decision actually plays a very important role long term, because that's how the overall expansion and the scale of that technology happens. I mean, we hear so many different stories and amazing stories about AI, ML, or Gen AI use cases that are being implemented, but they are implemented only in a pocket. There is a production pilot that basically gets very, very successful, but the scaling up that specific use case across the enterprise becomes almost impossible, because the tech stack that you already have is not compatible or not modern enough to marry with the new technology that you are bringing in, right? So the decision making on such aspects for the long term and future proofing, to your point, is extremely important. And the second point, which I already have made, especially about making your captive talent pool, which becomes difficult for the talent pool to really just wiggle out, because those are not the transferable skills. You have created a transferable skill as a one portion, and then you are basically adding some additional skills which are more your own business oriented, and the tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Those will be the three things I would say.
Very quickly, do you see a scope for inter-GCC collaboration for shared risk mitigation frameworks?
Amazing question, and I think that's one area. So if you really look at the past, right, I think last 30 years I already talked about, most of this work was done by the system integration companies, and they were fiercely fighting with each other, right? I mean, to a point where they were poaching each other's CEO also, right? So, but now the GCCs are not competing with each other. GCCs, there is a really good collaboration index, very, very high collaboration index, right? Because unless the GCC is in a very, very specific industry segment and your parent companies are sort of competing, I mean, there is no competition. So in my opinion, there is a really good scope for this. I mean, I'm proud to say that my company is promoting GCC councils for our customers, where the customers come together and discuss about very, very specific situations and try to understand the problem statement and bring a solution. Those kind of solutions are really good for the overall ecosystem, and I think that's one area that we have been calling GCCs more of an ecosystem. We don't call it an industry; it's an ecosystem which also includes not only the customers, who are sitting over here, but also the specific universities, the local the education bodies. Of course, we had the government in the morning here. All of them combined together create an ecosystem, and I think as we collaborate more, that ecosystem is going to get benefited.
Thank you so much. I think in the paucity of time, we'll have to close this discussion, but I'm sure there's a lot more to discuss on this, and I think this is just the start, and we will have a lot of takeaways from here and threads to take forward from here. On a very interesting note, Chakri and Tanay, just one word answer from you. You think GCCs in India, if they have a seat at the headquarters, it will help in risk mitigation? Whether they can have it or not is a different question.
It is a must. I would say that, and that's important for the collective risk mitigation at the corporate. So,
Tanay, do you see that happening?
You said one word. I'll echo.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.